There is a sentence sitting in a federal appellate brief filed in the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, docket number 25 to 2758, by the law firm Wilkie Farr and Gallagher on April 17, 2026. That tells you everything you need to know about who Aubrey Drake Graham really is in this moment. And it has almost nothing to do with Kendrick Lamar. The sentence is buried under appellate procedure and First Amendment doctrine, and it does not name the real defendant in this case. But I'm going to name the real defendant for you right now, on the record, in the first 30 seconds of this video, because nobody else in this entire commentary ecosystem is willing to say it plainly. The real defendant in Graham v. UMG Recordings is not Kendrick Lamar. The real defendant is not even Universal Music Group. The real defendant is the version of Drake that the public was sold from 2022 through 2024. The untouchable mogul, the apex predator of streaming, the man whose own legal team is now arguing in federal court that his own record label deliberately devalued his music and his brand to gain leverage against him in a contract negotiation. Read that twice. His own legal team, arguing in a federal complaint that UMG manufactured the cultural environment that broke him on purpose to renegotiate his deal down. That is not a fan theory. That is paragraph after paragraph of Drake's own filing, signed by his own counsel, entered into the federal docket. And the moment you understand that the appeal that hits the Second Circuit this year is not about whether a rap song was defamatory, but about whether Drake can use a federal courtroom to claw back leverage in a label deal he signed in 2022 for a reported $400 million, every single piece of the last 24 months. The OVO debt, the ICEMAN triple drop, the Lucian grain shots on his own album, the silence from a man who used to never stop talking, snaps into one picture. And the picture is not the one his fans have been showing you. When we get to the part where I lay out what the contract structure actually looks like and how the appeal is being used as a corporate weapon, you're going to understand why this entire chapter of his career was never about a diss record and was always about a renegotiation room he was supposed to walk into from a position of strength and instead is walking into from a position of legal defense. That is the story. That has always been the story. Everything else was theater. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now let me set the record straight on what actually happened, because there is a version of this timeline being sold in fan circles that has been edited down to a highlight reel, and the highlight reel leaves out every single fact that matters. In January 2025, Aubrey Drake Graham, through his legal entity Frozen Moments LLC, filed a defamation lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York against Universal Music Group Recordings Incorporated. He did not sue Kendrick Lamar. He did not name Kendrick Lamar as a defendant. He sued his own label, the label that distributes Kendrick Lamar, the label that distributes him, the label he had been signed to through Republic Records, through Young Money, through Cash Money, for over 16 years. The lawsuit alleged that UMG knowingly published and promoted the song Not Like Us, a track containing lyrics accusing the plaintiff of being a pedophile, despite knowing those allegations were false, and that UMG engaged in what the complaint described as schemes involving bots, payola, discounted licensing fees to streaming platforms, and other tactics to artificially inflate the song's commercial performance. The complaint also alleged something far more revealing than the bot claims, and this is the part the fan circles do not want you to focus on. The complaint alleged, in its own words, that UMG anticipated that extending Drake's contract would be costly, and that by devaluing Drake's music and brand, UMG would gain leverage to force Drake to sign a new deal on terms more favorable to UMG. That language is not my characterization. That is the language of the plaintiff's own filing, as reported by Forbes and confirmed in the docket. The lawsuit was not really about a song. The lawsuit was about a renegotiation. The renegotiation of the reported $400 million contract Drake signed with UMG in 2022. A deal Variety described at the time as LeBron-sized, covering recordings, publishing, merchandise, and visual media. The kind of agreement that locks an artist down until they deliver a specific number of albums. The stakes here are not reputational. They are structural. They are the difference between Drake walking out of his next deal as a free agent with his catalog, his publishing, and his masters under his control, versus walking out the other side of the story as the cautionary tale the industry holds up to the next artist who thinks he can sue his way to leverage. And on October 9, 2025, United States District Judge Jeanette A. Vargas dismissed the entire lawsuit with prejudice, ruling that the lyrics in Not Like Us constituted an unactionable opinion protected by the First Amendment. Dismissed with prejudice. That phrase matters. That is not a setback. That is a wall. And on January 29, 2026, Drake's legal team filed a notice of appeal in the Second Circuit. And on April 17, 2026, they filed a reply brief arguing that the district court created what they call a dangerous categorical rule, that rap diss tracks can never be actionable. That is where we are. That is where this story sits in real time. And every single thing happening in the world of Aubrey Drake Graham right now. The OVO debt that we already broke down on this channel, the ICEMAN triple drop, the alleged shots at the UMG chairman on his own label-distributed album. Every single thing is downstream of that appeal. Let me show you the surface evidence, because the surface alone is enough to make a reasonable person question the entire mogul narrative. Surface evidence piece number 1 is the original complaint itself. Drake's lawyers did not just allege defamation. They alleged that UMG used bots to inflate Spotify streams of Not Like Us, that UMG arranged pay-to-play schemes with radio networks, that UMG offered discounted licensing fees to digital service providers in exchange for promotional positioning. And they did all of this allegedly in coordination with a strategic devaluation of one of their own top artists. Surface evidence piece number 2 is the iHeartMedia settlement. Drake filed a separate legal action against iHeartMedia over alleged payola involving Not Like Us, and that action was settled, with the settlement reported in early 2025. Settlements are not admissions, and I want to be precise about that, but settlements are also not nothing. The plaintiff sued a major radio conglomerate, and the major radio conglomerate did not fight him in open court. They settled. Connect that to the broader complaint and ask yourself what that pattern looks like in aggregate. Surface evidence piece number 3 is the dismissal order itself. 38 pages, signed by Judge Vargas, public record on the Southern District of New York's docket. The opinion does not just dismiss the claim. It dismantles it. The court found that no reasonable listener would interpret the lyrics of a diss track as factual assertions, given the established norms of rap battles. The court found that the surrounding context, including Drake's own track tailor-made freestyle, which Drake's appellate team now argues should not have been considered, provided framework in which a reasonable listener understood the entire exchange as artistic competition rather than factual claim. Surface evidence piece number 4 is the procedural reality of the appeal itself. Drake's reply brief, filed April 17, 2026, runs through page after page arguing that Judge Vargas relied heavily on materials outside the pleadings, weighed evidence she should not have weighed at the motion to dismiss stage, and drew adverse factual inferences against the plaintiff. In legal terms, that is an argument that the district court committed reversible error. In plain English, that is Drake's lawyers saying the judge prejudged the merits of the case. That is a serious claim to make against a federal judge, and the strength of the argument is going to be tested in front of a 3-judge appellate panel that has no skin in the rap game, no investment in any artist catalog, and exactly zero interest in cultural narratives. They are going to look at the pleadings, the standard of review, and the precedent. That is it. And the precedent does not move in Drake's favor. The body of New York defamation law gives broad First Amendment protection to artistic expression, particularly in genres with established traditions of provocation and exaggeration. Drake's legal team knows this. UMG's legal team knows this. The Second Circuit knows this. The only people who do not seem to know this are the fans being told the appeal is going to bring everything back. And oh, do I have more for you? Because the appeal is not even the most damaging document in this entire record, and the Drake fans who have been camping out in my comment section telling me this lawsuit is going to vindicate their guy are really not going to like what comes next. The amicus briefs filed in this appeal are where the Real prosecution begins, and they are filed by some of the most credentialed First Amendment scholars in the entire American Legal Academy. Pay attention, because this is the part that nobody else is breaking down in detail. The first amicus brief that matters is the one filed by the Yale Law School Media Freedom and Information Access Clinic, also known as the MFIA Clinic, operating out of the Floyd Abrams Institute for Freedom of Expression. The Floyd Abrams Institute is named after the most celebrated First Amendment litigator in American history. When the Floyd Abrams Institute files an amicus brief, the legal community reads it. And the MFIA Clinic filed that brief in support of Universal Music Group against Drake. Their argument in the simplest possible terms is that Drake consented to the exchange. They likened him to a boxer who challenged a champion to a fight and then sued for battery after losing. Cultural evidence piece number 1 is the existence of that brief itself. Because the moment Yale Law's First Amendment clinic lines up behind your record label and against you in your own defamation case, you have lost the legal narrative in every room that matters. Drake's reply brief calls the Yale argument, quote, imaginative, and notes that consent is an affirmative defense UMG never formally raised. That is the legal vocabulary for, we do not have a counter-argument that works, so we're going to call their argument creative and move on. Cultural evidence piece number 2 is the second amicus brief, filed by the Intellectual Property, Arts, and Technology Clinic at UC Irvine on behalf of a coalition of social scientists and legal scholars, also in support of UMG. 2 amicus briefs, both backing a label, both filed by clinics housed in elite American law schools. The cultural reading of that is unambiguous. The First Amendment establishment is not on Drake's side in this appeal. They are on the other side of the table. Cultural evidence piece number 3 is what is happening in the artist community while this case has been pending. Kendrick Lamar has not said a single word about the lawsuit. Not a tweet, not a press statement, not a freestyle, not a podcast appearance referencing it. He has been doing the work. GNX. The Super Bowl 59 halftime performance in February 2025 in front of 133.5 million viewers, with a reported 3.65 billion in global viewership across all platforms. A number that Drake's own reply brief cites as a point of comparison to underscore how widely the lyrics have spread, which is a stunning own goal when you remember that the same brief is asking a court to redress the reputational damage caused by that spread. The plaintiff's appellate team is essentially admitting in its own filing that the cultural moment has already metastasized beyond any legal remedy. Cultural evidence piece number 4 is the silence from the executive layer that Drake spent 15 years cultivating. Lucian Grange, the chairman and chief executive officer of Universal Music Group, has said nothing publicly about this case. Republic Records executives have said nothing. The label has let its legal filings speak, and the legal filings have not been kind. UMG's response brief argued that Drake had, quote, goaded Lamar into writing the lyrics he is now suing over, and that rap diss tracks, quote, signal if not shout opinion not fact. UMG's brief called Drake's position, quote, astoundingly hypocritical. That is your own label, in a federal filing, calling you hypocritical. That is what the cultural relationship between Aubrey Drake Graham and the company he generates revenue for looks like right now in writing. And here is the part where I have to acknowledge the counterargument, because the audience deserves the honest version of this conversation. The Drake legal team's strongest argument on appeal is not really about Kendrick Lamar's lyrics in isolation. It is about the procedural posture of the dismissal. They are arguing that the district court considered evidence outside the 4 corners of the complaint at a stage when it was only supposed to consider whether the complaint, on its face, stated a legally cognizable claim. That is a real argument. That is not a frivolous argument. If the Second Circuit panel agrees that Judge Vargas exceeded the proper scope of review at the motion-to-dismiss stage, the case could be sent back down for further proceedings. That is a possibility. I am not going to pretend it is not. But here is what the Drake fans who are hanging their hat on that procedural argument do not understand. Even if the case is remanded, even if discovery proceeds, even if Drake gets the chance to depose UMG executives about bot allegations and payola schemes, the underlying First Amendment problem does not go away. The lyrics still have to be evaluated as fact or opinion under New York defamation law, and the precedent on that question is overwhelming. The procedural win is a delay. It is not a victory. And the cost of getting that delay is years more of public litigation, years more of his label deal sitting in legal limbo, years more of every business partner watching this case before signing anything with him. Now I have to shift this conversation because everything I just laid out is the entertainment layer of the legal story, and the entertainment layer is not where the case actually lives. We need to have the real conversation about what this lawsuit is, what it has always been, and what it is going to cost the plaintiff regardless of what the Second Circuit ultimately rules. The lawsuit is leverage. The lawsuit was leverage on the day it was filed in January 2025. The lawsuit was leverage when it was dismissed in October 2025. The lawsuit is leverage right now as it sits in the Second Circuit, and the lawsuit will continue to be leverage whether the appellate panel reverses or affirms. Let me walk through 3 systemic layers that explain why, because this is the part of the breakdown that nobody else is willing to do honestly. Systemic Layer 1. The contract architecture. When Drake re-signed with Universal Music Group in 2022 in the deal reported by Variety to be worth upward of $400 million, that deal was not a recording contract in the traditional sense. It was a multifaceted agreement that covered recordings, publishing, merchandising, and visual media, a comprehensive commercial relationship with delivery obligations that locked the artist in until those obligations are satisfied. The leading industry theory, which has been reported across multiple outlets including the New York Times reporting by Joe Coscarelli, is that the ICEMAN trilogy released on May 15, 2026, ICEMAN, Habibti, and Maid of Honor, was engineered to satisfy the remaining album delivery requirements under that deal in a single weekend. Drake reportedly walked into a live stream with 3 hard drives and said, quote, "I made this so that I could make this." That line was not an aesthetic flourish. That line was a confession of corporate intent. He made 3 albums to be free. And the moment you understand the contract structure, you understand why the lawsuit was filed in the first place. The lawsuit gives him leverage at the negotiation table. The lawsuit gives him a reason to argue that UMG breached an implicit duty of good faith. The lawsuit gives him an exit strategy that does not look like a retreat. Whether or not the lawsuit ever produces a single dollar in damages is almost beside the point. The lawsuit exists to change the temperature in the room where the next deal is being discussed. That is its job. And once you understand that, the appellate filings stop reading like a defamation case and start reading like a corporate negotiation tactic conducted through federal court.